Hi, I'm Monica Humple. I'm a Master Certified Coach, and this is part of a series I'm doing specifically for the unfaithful spouse. I hope these have been helpful to you and help you understand a bit about what your betrayed spouse is going through. In this video, we're going to get a little bit scientific, but I think it's important to understand that what your spouse is experiencing through betrayal trauma is PTSD, and that it can explain a little bit about why they act the way they act, why their emotions are so challenging. So let me explain a little bit about what's happening inside of their brain. This is trauma. So trauma is there are varying degrees of trauma, but trauma is trauma, meaning that there is a direct impact physiologically on the brain. When we feel an intense level of emotional distress in a given moment, and it's a lot of emotion at one time, and it's a powerful force, that imprints in our brain. And the three main parts of our brain that are affected by trauma are the amygdala, which is the fear center of our brain, our fight or flight, prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that is a problem-solving part of our brain, and the hippocampus, which is the part of our brain that is the filing system for our memories. So what happens with these three parts of the brain when we experience trauma is it's an abnormal recording of a memory, if you will. In a normal case, if you were to go, if you had breakfast this morning and you remember yourself making breakfast and what you had for breakfast, that is a normal imprint of a short-term memory. Trauma memory is imprinted in an extreme long term, and it's imprinted in such a way that these three parts of the brain are abnormally affected. The amygdala, being your fight or flight, has taken that trauma memory and has created it into something that is going to be brought up quite frequently anytime your spouse is reminded of the affair. Anything, a song on the radio, something they drive past going to work, whatever it may be, anything like that is going to trigger the amygdala to think this person is in danger, because that type of emotional response we have when we find out about the affair is an extreme fear response. So the amygdala thinks in the moment that your spouse is triggered, that your spouse is in imminent danger. So physiologically, the amygdala is going to light up, and they actually have MRIs. You can Google this. They have MRI images in the brains of people with PTSD when they're being triggered, and their brains are lit up like a Christmas tree. And actually, there are changes in the brain in general I'll get to in just a minute. But in the moment that your spouse is triggered by something, their brain thinks they're in danger. Your spouse's heart rate will start accelerating. They will start breathing a little more shallowly. Sometimes we get very nauseous. Sometimes we get sick to our stomach in other ways. We start to shake, uncontrollable shaking. Okay, so when your amygdala is triggered like this and you're in fight or flight, what happens is that prefrontal cortex, that is your problem solving and your logistical thinking brain part, it kind of shuts down. It doesn't shut down completely, but it starts to dampen, because if you were genuinely in harm's way, the amygdala's job is to get you out of harm's way. So your amygdala, you don't have time to think. Your amygdala is telling you, you better get out of here. That's fight or flight. You don't have time to think, just go. Your spouse, when they are triggered, this is why you probably think they're crazy or something's going on. They cannot help it. This is literally what's happening in their brain. It is fight or flight. And they're not thinking straight, because that prefrontal cortex is not working correctly. They can't logistically go, oh, it's just a song on the radio, no big deal. Their brain thinks it is a big deal, and their brain is trying to protect them from danger, because the moment they found out about the affair, they were in imminent danger. Their safety was gone in that relationship. They were scared to death. That is why they're traumatized. Now, let's go to the hippocampus for a minute. The hippocampus actually shrinks if you have repeated trauma. Your hippocampus's job is to sort and protect, and it's like the filing system for your memories. It pulls up appropriate memories at appropriate times. And if your hippocampus can't do its job correctly, that's a problem. Okay? So if you can just for a second imagine if that's your brain and how hard it would be to function normally and to think clearly. It's hard. I encourage you, Google it sometimes. Google what happens to your brain in trauma situations. You can even add affair trauma to that, or betrayal trauma, and you can read all about it yourself. The more you can understand that your spouse is not acting that way to purposefully harm you or irritate you or frustrate you or whatever. They are trying really hard to get through something that's extraordinarily painful and manage what's happening in here. It is difficult. It really, really is. How can you help? Try to understand. Try to empathize with the fact that they are dealing with something that's physiological as much as it is emotional and mental. I mean, this is a physiological thing. This is their brain. This is something they can't help in many ways. Now, before you think this is going to be the rest of your life, I promise, it does get better. And the thing with trauma doesn't go away. But many of us, especially once we've had a chance to get through our grief process and once we've had an opportunity to really work on things, we become pretty good at managing it. Once you recognize what's happening, and I work with my clients on this all the time, and I've seen how they can get from point A to point B, and I see the growth and the ability to manage it. I myself have gotten really good at managing it. So once we're good at that and we can manage it better, it gets better. It does. We get to a place where triggers don't bother us as much. But if you're in the early stages of affair recovery with your spouse right now, please understand they are doing the best they can. It actually makes us feel a little bit crazy. And the more you can lean in and try to be patient and try to understand and be supportive in this process that they're going through, the better off they're going to be, and the more likely, really, that they'll find the skills and abilities necessary to manage it better. Okay. So there's your science lesson. I hope this is helpful. Again, I encourage you to go Google it and look it up, to what happens in the brain and why it's challenging for people with trauma to think clearly. And this could explain a lot about why your spouse is pulling up these memories from 15 years ago and throwing them in your face. Again, that hippocampus gets a little skewed. And it makes it harder for them to remember things correctly, or they'll pull a really deep entrenched memory from a long time ago. It's just a lot of stuff. Try to be patient with them, okay? Try to be patient with them. Look it up, educate yourself, and lean in as if you really do understand that this is hard for them. And trust me, they want to get over this. They want to move through this trauma just as much as you want them to move through this trauma. They really want to get on the other side of it as much as you want them to get on the other side. But it will take time. It will take time and a lot of work on their part. So try to be patient. Try to be patient with them, okay?